All right, so we've got a question here from Alan, and he is asking about the option whether to lease or purchase his car. Specifically, he's wanting to know whether or not he should lease for less and invest the difference, or if he should make a purchase and own the car, which sounds like a better long-term option to him. Now, this is one of those scenarios where it is certainly it depends answer. And so you can kind of look at it both ways. There's a case to be made both ways. Now, there's a couple of really important considerations to be made. First of all, how long might you keep the car? Typically a lease would run you anywhere from 2 to 4 years. And so if that's typically how long you keep a car, then, a lease is something to consider. Whereas, if you're going to keep it longer, then maybe it makes more sense for you to build the equity in the car and potentially not have a payment a few years down the road. And so, the timeline for which you plan to keep the car is something to consider in this case. Another thing you may want to consider is how large of a monthly payment you can afford. When you lease a car, the payments are typically going to be less than if you were to make an outright purchase of the car. And, that's going to play into your decision here as far as your budget goes. So when you buy a car, your payments are based on the total purchase of that car. Now compare that with the leasing of that same car, where your payments are going to be based on the car's expected decrease in value over the term of the lease. There's going to be a noticeable difference in the amount of money that you're paying each month between the two. Now the lease payments may be low enough to put you behind the wheel of your dream car. That's assuming you've got the necessary cash to put down up front, because typically when you lease the car, you are going to have to come up with some sort of a down payment or cash that basically is going to be gone, because unlike if you were to put that into the car, if you were going to purchase it, that would actually go towards the equity in the car, and with a lease, you will not actually be building any equity. So another thing to consider is how will you treat the car, because as you may know, when you lease the car, there's going to be some restrictions on how far you drive each year, and obviously it's going to have to be turned back in at some point, and so the company's going to want it to remain in good condition, obviously. The average lease will restrict you probably somewhere between 12,000 and 15,000 miles per year, and if you exceed that amount, then you may have to pay extra per mile based on how many miles you go over that 12 to 15,000, whatever the case may be. If you've got a long commute, or intend to travel, cross country or anything like that, then buying may be the better option, because that certainly is going to play into it without regard even to how long or how much you can afford. I mean, even if you plan to keep the car a very short time and you like the fact that there's a lower monthly payment, if you're going to lease the car yet you drive a lot or far distances, then it's certainly going to be something that could deter you away from actually making the lease instead of course, purchasing the vehicle outright. So a few other things to consider here. Most of these lease agreements only allow the normal wear and tear on the car, and so any dents, scratches, or any other types of damage that might happen to the car are going to be up to you to fix. And of course, that's something that's going to benefit the leasing agency, not you. So you have to treat it with care, probably even more so than you might your own car. It's definitely something to be conscious of. But if you know you're tough on a car, or you live in a neighborhood where there's only street parking, then maybe that's another consideration that's showing it may not be right for you. But finally, when you buy a car, it's yours to do with you please. And so in contrast to what I just said about the lease, if you decide that you want to fix the dent or the scratch or anything like that, then great, and you can do that, and that actually benefits you. Or if maybe you don't have the money to do that right now, or just prefer not to, then you've got the option to do that. So Alan, hope that answers your question, and if you need any further clarification, just send us another one.